I am going to read a poem that I wrote back in originally in 1993 when I was 23, and then I revised in 1998 when I was 28. It's a song. It's a poem called "The Seven Circles of Eternity's Garden," and it's highly influenced by T.S. Eliot. I was really into T.S. Eliot. His Wasteland and Four Quartets really influenced me. And so this poem structurally is that kind of thing. It's a pretty long poem. It's going to be in various sections. And what I wanted to do is to read it and then present kind of a video presentation that I've done with the T.S. Eliot poems early this last year. I want to do that with this poem because now that I'm in my 50s, I look back at this poem when I wrote it in my 20s, and it amazes me how much it has kind of, what can you say? Now that I'm 50, it really speaks to a lot of my life that I've lived. And I wrote this before I lived a lot of my life. And so what I wanted to do, like I said, is to do a kind of a dramatic reading with video for it. This is called The Seven Circles of Eternity's Garden. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Ecclesiastes 3:11. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. T.S. Eliot, Journey of the Magi. Circle 1, the blood of Eden. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Ezekiel 28:13. In the blood there is the life, and in the life there is the union, the everlasting communion of Eden, which echoes as footfalls in the memory or a shadow in the family, as moonlight in a factory yard, slicing through the darkness of a pale lunar night. Born into the blood and water, we violently scream, fearing our future, lamenting our loss, expelled from Eden, paradise lost, now falling into the shadow, the desert's room of rust, as echoes disturb the fallen dust, blown into a musty corner by some crimson mouth in some crimson-colored dream. Yet what eye has seen, what ear has heard the flaming sword's bright edge of fire, crossing between God's love, man's desire, burning, guarding the gate and piercing the sun that sets in the west when all hope is gone. No longer is heard the voice of the word. Our tongues have tasted the garden's fruit, with the lust that crawls, with the dust that mauls. Our memories tear us up from the roots. The circle of Eden, the garden of God, the circle of perpetual birth, where blood and water flow, from a single spring in the fullness of the garden. There is saturation. There is the manifestation of the single white rose, nourished in the blood and water. The blood and the water. For in the blood there is the life, and in the life there is the union. The children of Eden haunt us in our memory. Our dying pulse echoes faintly to the sounds of the Pishon and the Gihon. We hear them surging in our distant veins. Rivers crash like distant waterfalls of an unknown land, yet their voices we cannot understand. We can only hear their fury. We can only hear them roar. For in the blood there beats a life that roars, and a union that crashes like a waterfall at war. And we are afraid. We are alone. Our memories haunt us within our darkened rooms. Our eyes are opened, yet we see nothing but shadows. Our ears are peeled, yet we hear nothing but alley cats that dig in the garbage and gutters, searching for a morsel amid the city's clutter. We fear our future, and we lock our doors, lamenting our loss, bereaving our fate, sweating in the blood. In our beginning, back when the sound was a voice, and the voice was comprehended, when the word was breathed into our nostrils, filling up our hollow cavities of dust. The word was spoken, and the word was heard, and the word roared, filling the earth with blood and with water, breathing the men of Eden into his union, the deeper communion of God. As I am, so you are, a community of one, here in the garden of our delight. What tree is this that strangely bleeds? What fruit is this that pleasure feeds off of the flood of dripping blood that permeates its roots and leaves? Pregnant with such life as this, desired with the blood of bliss, the serpent spoke, the man awoke, the voice was left for a soothing hiss. Yet when this strange fruit was taken in, with crimson juice dripping from each crimson chin, then we saw our tree, a shadow, our breath was taken from lung and from marrow. The black blood was spilled, the seed was sown, and the man now too became dust and bone. For in the shadow of the tree of life there laid the knowledge of death and of strife. The tree was empty, the fruit was bare, and the man, now many, became painfully aware that with the setting of Eden's sun, the tree's growing shadow had left us undone. Together in the desert of perpetual night, growing old and feeble with cataractic sight, with the circle now broken, the flesh now torn, the men now distant, into darkness were born. Here I am, an old man in a dry month, and the freezing winter crouches at my door. I cannot master it. I have no life left in these arthritic bones. The marrow has been sucked out as juice from a withered apple, as oil from a crushed olive, and no life remains, only a brittle frame huddling under a dead tree that gives no shelter from the autumn sun, banished to the desert in the shadow of death, ever increasing as the sun sets on the western horizon. Far off to the east, across the desert of wandering, the great cities of Rome lie flat on the horizon, far from the four rivers, far from the olive tree, far from the single white rose. In the middle distance, a shattered visage lies, naked and sneering, and eaten by flies. Look upon our works, O Lord, look upon our works and despair. Nothing of your creation remains, only bodies that rot and hearts that tear. O my people, what have you done? The lone and leveled race of Eden stretches far away, across the sand of the shadow's vast expanse. Though marked for murder and banished and cursed, my memory still lives beyond the eastern gate that slowly fades with the setting of the sun. And the shadow of time holds me prisoner to all that slithers on the ground, for I cannot live in my memory. I must live within the walls of darkness, within this time of the shadow of the desert, within this freezing winter, my garden grave, as the easterly wind chews my bones, blowing, blowing, blowing over empty shadows.